Hey everybody, so here we are with the sprues all and paints all out of the box set. I had already started to clip the pieces off, but decided that I would actually record this for you guys as well. I had already started clipping this piece as well, so I only have like a couple more sections to clip off. And I wanted to just assemble this mini so that you guys can kind of assemble the miniatures along with me, or see the process of actually clipping off and assembling the miniatures. So here I have my clippers, and all I'm going to do is I'm just going to place it along the flat edge of the clippers, along the sprue where you want to clip the miniature off of. Be careful not to clip off this entire little nub right over here. There's a section where we need to attach the arm to. So I'm going to just place the clippers where I need to and then just snip that off. I'm going to go ahead and clip off the arms as well. In this instance, I actually want to, because the Marine is looking kind of towards the left this way, I'm going to actually go ahead and clip off this arm right here, so that way he looks like he's pointing at something in that direction. We don't want him pointing while he's looking the other direction, because I believe one of the other Marines, yeah, like for instance, this guy's, he's looking to the right. We don't want him pointing to the left while looking to the right. So I'm just making the conscious decision of selecting the correct pieces that I like that would make sense. We'll go ahead and clip off the backpack as well. And we have the backpack for the Marine. Now all we really need is the right arm, which is going to be any one of these bolters. And to me, they pretty much all look the same, with the exception of maybe the angles are a little off, but you can pick and choose whichever suits you best or your interest. There's no right or wrong here as to which piece you're going to use. So pretty much, here's all the assemblies. You have 5 pieces, and that's all you need to assemble the complete Marine from this box set. You have the base with the feet already attached to it. The full Marine will sit in these slots, and then you have your 2 arms. And then you have your backpack. So there's your assembled Marine. Now the thing is, in the last video I was talking about how you should use super glue. As you guys can see, I didn't really use any super glue here. However, it's a good idea that unless you want your pieces to come off, you should probably super glue your piece, your miniature together. But before I go ahead and actually super glue the miniature together, I'm going to clean up the model, and with that I'm going to just use an X-Acto knife, and I'm just going to use the side of the blade to actually clean off the model. I do have a video on cleaning up models and preparation. If you guys want to go ahead and check that out, you guys can click my playlist or go into my video channel and look for the model prep and assembly. And once I finish cleaning this up, I'll come back and then we can get started with priming the miniature and painting it. And we're back, and with the power of video editing, I have saved you guys the trouble of watching me scraping off all the mold lines on the miniature and gluing the piece together. It took about 20 minutes to shave off and clean off all the mold lines and then glue the piece together. I also realized, as while we were putting the miniature together, that the arm that I wanted to use, the arm that's pointing, does not actually fit on this body. It was leaving a slight gap in the back, and I wasn't able to use this arm. So I went ahead and grabbed this arm and glued this piece on. Now I wanted to test out the primer a little bit before I started this recording again, but I will have to say I am pretty disappointed with the primer in this little paint box, this little paint pot. So Games Workshop or anybody that works, I am disappointed. I really had high hopes for this, but the primer itself, when I tried to use it, is not thick enough, right? It comes down almost like a wash. And the reason it comes down almost like a wash is because whatever primer that they had, the brushable primer, if you look at this pot, it's all dried on the side of the pot. So there's actually nothing else in here other than, if I paint this on here, it almost looks like a black wash. So with that being said, I'm pretty disappointed in that aspect of this. For a miniature painter who's looking to get started at painting and not having an actual primer to use, that's a little disappointing. So for the purposes of the video and the quality of the content, I'm not going to use this primer because I can't prime the miniature. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually use a different primer that I have. The primer that I used is Vallejo Surface Primer. This is something that I recommend that I've posted up in my previous video. It's pretty cheap. It's really cheap. I picked it up on Amazon. So I'm just going to use this to replace the primer. Now, if you get a box set of the Space Marine and paint set, and your primer is pretty decent and okay, then you don't have to worry about picking up this primer as well. But because of the situation I was put in terms of not being able to use the primer since it was all dried, I'm just going to go ahead and use this primer. This happens to be a dark gray primer, so it's not quite black, but it essentially works the same way. So what you're going to do is you're going to dip your paintbrush into the primer and just lather it on your miniature. Now, the one thing that you do want to do and be careful of is pooling. What that means is you don't want to prime and put the primer on the miniature and have it sit all in one area in a big puddle. You want to move the primer around so that you have a very, very thin coat. The reason primer is used is to adhere the paint onto the miniature and have a strong grip instead of gripping onto the plastic. So unlike the mold line removal and preparation and assembly where I cut the video, I will do this live with you guys just so that you guys can see roughly how long it takes to prime a miniature. Now, the thing about primer is there's this myth that you have to fully cover entire piece so that you have no plastic showing through, that it has to be completely thick is actually false. Even if you have just a very light primer and you can still see some of the plastic through it, it should be okay. It shouldn't be a problem. So again, you don't have to spend an hour priming the miniature, but you do want to make sure that you have pretty good coverage throughout the miniature. That's important. So don't worry about the thickness of how much primer you put on as opposed to the quality that you actually lay it down on, right? You want to still show all the details of the miniature. So again, I'm just using Vallejo Surface Primer here because the Citadel Black primer was all dried up already. Essentially the same thing, same stages of brushing the primer on. So I'm nearly finished here. And now once you get all the primer down, what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to sit and wait on this piece. So right here, I've got the miniature pretty much covered from head to toe in primer. One of the things that you do want to check for is the underside. Sometimes you end up missing the underside. You want to make sure you catch all of that. Okay, and so like for example here, just by doing this demonstration, I showed I missed a section here on the bolter as well as a section inside here. So it's always good to just double check before you set the model to dry. You know, you might want to prime this piece and then set it on the table and then and give it like 10 minutes to dry, and then come back and find out you missed a spot, and then you kind of have to repeat the process. So always just check before you set the model down to make sure you caught every nook and cranny. Again, it doesn't mean you have to get it fully covered to the point where you don't see any of the gray plastic. For example, as this primer is drying over here, there are certain areas where it looks a little splotchy and you have a little bit of gray. That's okay, because I've already covered through the entire model with the primer, and there's a very, very thin film or layer of primer on there. That's all you need. I just don't want to have the actual exposed plastic showing. Alright, so with that being said, I'm going to sit this model down and let it dry completely before I go on and continue painting. So with the power of editing again, I will see you guys on the other side.